Here is your story, complete and unbroken, no headings, no labels, just the narrative itself. Eleanor Shen was the kind of person who arrived at work before the sun did. Not because anyone asked her to. Not because she was chasing a promotion or trying to impress someone. She came early because the office was quiet in those first hours, and quiet was the only condition under which she could actually think. By the time her brother Marcus walked in at 9:15, always with a coffee he had not made himself, Eleanor had already done 3 hours of work that would carry his name by the end of the day. That was simply how things were in the Shen family. Their father, Robert Shen, had built Shen Holdings from a single laundromat in 1981. He had worked 7 days a week for 11 years before he could afford to hire his first employee. He was a hard man in the way that people who survive difficult things often become hard, not cruel, but practical in a way that left little room for softness. He believed in the family business the way other men believe in a religion. And like most religions, it had a hierarchy. Marcus was the eldest son. The heir. The name on the door, even before there was a door worth naming. Eleanor understood this. She had understood it since she was 12 years old and watched her father explain the company's accounting system to Marcus, who was 17 and looking at his watch. She was the one who asked the follow-up questions. She was the one who stayed after to help organize the files. Her father noticed. He said nothing, but he noticed. She joined the company at 23, straight out of a business degree she had partly funded herself. She managed the books. Then she managed the vendors. Then she managed the relationships with lenders, contractors, and local government offices, which are the 3 pillars that hold up any real estate company and the 3 things most people in such a company prefer not to deal with. She did not receive a title that reflected any of this. She was listed in the company directory as Operations Coordinator. She had been Operations Coordinator for 19 years. When their father died, 3 years before the story begins, Marcus inherited everything. Eleanor received the vacation condo in Scottsdale, Arizona, and a handwritten note from her father that said, simply, "You always knew what you were doing." She framed the note. She told herself it was enough. She was 41 years old and very good at telling herself that things were enough. Then, in October of her 41st year, she got sick. Stage 4. Pancreatic. The oncologist was a careful woman who chose her words with precision, and even she had no better way to frame it than to say 18 months was optimistic. Eleanor sat in the clinic chair and listened and nodded and thanked the doctor for her honesty. She did not cry until she was in her car, and even then she stopped after a few minutes, because she had always found prolonged grief to be inefficient. She told Marcus on a Thursday. He came to her apartment and sat across from her at the kitchen table and looked genuinely shaken, which she appreciated. He held her hand. He said all the right things. He meant most of them. He left at 9 o'clock because he had an early morning, and Eleanor understood that too. 2 weeks later, she coded in her hospital bed. For 4 minutes and 11 seconds, Eleanor Shen had no pulse. The nurses moved fast. The machines made the sounds machines make. And then, improbably, everything came back. Her heart restarted. Her eyes opened. The attending physician told her later that he had been practicing medicine for 26 years and still did not have a satisfying explanation for why some people came back and some did not. Eleanor did not spend much time on that question. What she thought about, in the hours after she regained consciousness, was far more practical. She thought about the refinancing deal on the Pomona property, which needed active management through January or the lender would reset the terms. She thought about Desmond Cho, the contractor who had worked with Shen Holdings for 22 years, whose loyalty was not to the company logo but to the relationship, and who could be lost with one thoughtless renegotiation. She thought about the exit clause in the commercial lease at the Riverside property, the one buried in the 3rd addendum that Marcus had never read because she had always summarized things for him. She thought, this company is a clock. I have been the mechanism inside it. Nobody knows what holds the hands in place. And then she thought something she had not allowed herself to think in 19 years, what would I do if I stopped? The answer surprised her with how quickly it arrived. She would go to Scottsdale. She would sit on the patio of the condo her father left her and watch the light move across the desert. She would take her dog for long walks in the early morning, which is the best time to walk in the desert because the air still holds the cool of the night. She would sleep well. She would, for the first time since she was 12 years old, let someone else carry the weight of the Shin family's concerns. She gave her notice on a Tuesday. Marcus responded the way people respond when they don't yet understand what they're losing. He was gracious. He said it was completely understandable given her health. He said he would manage. He used the phrase, lean into the challenge, which Eleanor recognized as the kind of thing he said when he had not yet done the thinking behind the words. She offered a 2-month handoff period. She documented everything she knew in a binder that was 214 pages long, organized alphabetically, with a table of contents and cross-referenced appendices. Marcus thanked her warmly at her farewell lunch. He gave a short speech about her dedication and what she meant to the company. Several employees cried. Eleanor smiled and ate her food and thought about what kind of furniture she wanted on the Scottsdale patio. She moved in November. By December, she had found a good doctor in Phoenix, established a treatment schedule that she managed with the same organizational precision she had applied to everything else in her life, sold a portion of her stake in the Inland Empire warehouse to an industrial logistics company for enough money to cover 3 years of medical costs, and adopted a rescue dog named Franklin, who was large, calm, and apparently unbothered by anything. She did not call to check on the company. She did not need to. The first sign that things were not well came in February, through a former colleague named Janet who had worked alongside Eleanor for 11 years and had a habit of texting screenshots. The screenshot was of an email chain regarding the Pomona property refinancing. The lender had reset the terms. The rate was 1.4 points higher. It was not ruinous, but it was the kind of error that compounds, and Eleanor knew, because she had spent 19 years watching compounding errors, that they rarely arrived alone. The second sign came in March. Desmond Cho texted Eleanor directly, which he almost never did. He said he was sorry to bother her. He said Marcus had renegotiated his contract, cutting his rate by 8%. He said he had tried to explain the history of the relationship, how the below-market rate was connected to the reliability of payment and the long trust between them, but that Marcus had seemed to see it as a simple math problem. Desmond was taking his crew elsewhere. He was genuinely sorry. He wanted Eleanor to know it was not about her. She called Desmond back and they spoke for 40 minutes, not about business, but about how his daughter was finishing her architecture degree and how his wife's garden was doing well this year. She wished him well. She meant it. In April, Marcus called her for the first time since she had moved. The call began with questions about her health, which she answered honestly and concisely. Then Marcus mentioned, in a tone that was trying to sound casual and not quite managing it, that the Riverside commercial tenant had triggered an exit clause that he had not been aware of. The loss of that tenant created a cash gap that coincided unfortunately with the 2 renovation projects that were both running over budget, because the new contractors Marcus had hired online were not Desmond Cho. Eleanor listened. She asked a few questions. She suggested he speak with the family's private banker. The conversation ended politely. She sat on the patio after she hung up. Franklin put his head on her knee. The sun was doing something beautiful over the saguaros, that specific orange gold it produces in the late afternoon that she had read about in tourist brochures her whole life and had not actually seen until she moved here. She sat with it for a long time. She did not feel pleased about Marcus's problems. That was the part of the story that often gets misunderstood when people hear it. They assume that a woman in her position must feel some sharp satisfaction, some vindicated pleasure. Eleanor did not feel that. What she felt was something quieter and more complicated. She felt sad for the company her father had built. She felt tired in the particular way that comes from spending decades being right while being overlooked. And underneath both of those things, she felt something she had not felt in a very long time, free. Not happy free, but the deeper kind, the kind that comes when you finally stop carrying something you never agreed to carry in the first place. In September, 11 months after she left, Marcus called again. This time the call began without the questions about her health. He told her the company needed her back. He used the word family 3 times in the first minute. He said their father would have wanted them to work together. He said she was the only person who truly understood how Shin Holdings operated. Every single thing he said was true. Eleanor let him finish. She was standing at the kitchen counter, drinking tea, watching Franklin sleep on the living room floor in a patch of morning sun. She told Marcus she needed to think about it. He heard that as a maybe. She already knew it was something else. She called her attorney the next morning. The woman's name was Patricia, and she had been Eleanor's personal attorney for 9 years, and Marcus's opinion of her was that she was too cautious, which Eleanor had always understood to mean that Patricia did not tell people what they wanted to hear. Eleanor proposed a consulting agreement. She would stabilize 3 of the 12 properties, specifically the ones with the most immediate cash flow risk. She would work remotely from Scottsdale. She would work no more than 20 hours a week, because she had a treatment schedule and a dog and a patio and a late afternoon light she was not willing to give up. And she would be paid her actual market rate, which Patricia calculated based on comparable consulting arrangements for operational executives with her experience and expertise. The number was significant. Marcus went quiet on the phone when Eleanor told him the figure. The silence lasted 4 full seconds, which in a phone conversation is a long time. Then he said he would need to review it with the board. The board, which he chaired, consisted largely of people who had worked with Eleanor and were quietly relieved to hear she was coming back in any capacity. He signed the agreement on a Friday. Eleanor was informed by Patricia via a short email. She read the email, closed her laptop, and took Franklin for a long walk through the neighborhood, which had a trail behind it that wound into the desert for 2 miles before turning back. She walked the whole loop slowly. The light was already doing that afternoon thing. A roadrunner crossed the path in front of them, very fast and entirely unbothered. She thought about her father, and about the note he had left her, the one in the frame on her desk. "You always knew what you were doing." She thought he had meant it as a compliment. She thought he had probably also meant it as an explanation, as close as he could come, in his practical and unsentimental way, to acknowledging what she had always known and he had never quite found the words for. She thought about the 4 minutes and 11 seconds in October, and how she had come back from them not different, exactly, but clearer. Like a window after rain. She did not think about the $50 million. Not because it didn't matter, but because it had never been hers and she had long since stopped measuring her life against it. What she had instead was a warehouse in the Inland Empire with a new roof and favorable zoning, a consulting rate that reflected what her work was actually worth, 3 years of medical costs covered, a dog who slept in patches of sun, and a condo her father left her that sat in the middle of the most beautiful late afternoon light she had ever seen. By January, the 3 stabilized properties were performing well. Marcus sent her a brief email thanking her for the work. He did not ask her to come back permanently. She did not offer. They had arrived, without ever discussing it, at the arrangement that should have existed 20 years ago, the one where she was compensated as a professional instead of relied upon as family. She was in the middle of renegotiating a vendor contract on a Tuesday morning when her phone lit up with a message from her oncologist. Her skin results were better than projected. Not cured, that was not a word her oncologist used, but better. Meaningfully better. She stared at the message for a moment. Then she finished the contract call, because she was in the middle of it and it would take another 10 minutes and she was not the kind of person who left things unfinished. After she hung up, she sat on the patio with Franklin and the results and the light. She had been given, by her father, a condo in the desert. She had been given, by her own body, a second chance at the life inside it. She had been given, by her brother, the slow and expensive education of watching someone find out what she had been worth all along. She was not angry about any of it. She was not at peace with all of it either. She was something more interesting than either. She was a woman who understood exactly what she had, and had stopped waiting for someone else to name it for her. Franklin stretched, turned in a circle, and settled back down beside her chair. The afternoon light moved across the saguaros the way it always did, as if it had been doing it forever and would continue long after both of them were gone. Eleanor drank her tea and stayed right there. *3,000 words. Clean language throughout, no headings or section labels, single-part narrative, *.